All right, guys, we're just getting started a few minutes early, and just want to make sure I've got things turned off so I don't suddenly have a phone call right in the middle of tonight's live stream. So just in case you're new to this is an Ask Me Anything live stream. And if you've been on these before, obviously just from the way the program's set up here right now, I still don't have the questions that'll be visible in the video as I'm answering them. Again, I'm still sticking with this modified setup that I have here in the studio. I do hope to be getting back to the pretty quick where you'll actually be able to see the questions as I'm doing the live stream. However, depending on whether you're looking at this on your computer or your phone, you'll see the chat area. That's where you put in the questions. And the only thing I'm asking is that if you can do the @WeTheGoverned if you have a question, it just makes it a little bit easier for me to be able to spot the question in the middle of the stream, just as there's usually, especially as we get towards the end of this, I find that there's a lot of comments and questions kind of coming at the same time. Totally fine if you guys want to comment back and forth. Every now and then I'll catch a comment too, but I am trying to get to questions that people are asking first as kind of a priority. At least the theory is that this is an Ask Me Anything. Doesn't mean that I can answer your question for sure, and doesn't mean that you'll even like my answer. That's not what this is. It's not a popularity contest, but it is an effort to try to answer whatever questions that you happen to have. Also, just real quick, one of the things I usually like to do is to give you a quick update on places that I will be in the near term, so that if you want to come meet me in person, which I love to meet people, and especially people who are interested in the political process and you care about it, and if you're kind of the wonkish person who's going to watch a live stream like this, that's probably you. And if you want to see me in person and talk to me and ask questions in person, I didn't bring my list with me, so I'm going to go off the top of my head. I know that Thursday night I'm speaking up in Federal Way at the 30th Legislative District Republican. So wherever their regular meeting is that evening, I'll be speaking there. My assumption is going to be somewhere around 6 to 7 o'clock, something like that. Saturday, if you are in Port Townsend, I'll be at the Jefferson County Republicans, kind of their Lincoln Day dinner / Oktoberfest event that they have out there. I know that opens at 11, so it's going to be kind of an afternoon thing, but if you happen to be out in Port Townsend, come on by. It's at the Boy Scout cabin, I do know that, and I just touched bases with some people about that. Also on my schedule, I know I have a presentation to the Thurston County Women's Republican Club, and I believe that's in the middle of the day. I think that's a lunch presentation as well. I don't remember where it is. And then I know Wednesday, and that's Tuesday of next week, and then Wednesday of next week, Wednesday night, I'm going to be doing a Doge Washington training in Fremont, which is, I believe, at the King County Republican headquarters down there. And the next night, which is Thursday night, I'll be doing a presentation at the 47th Legislative Republicans in Kent. So kind of hitting the whole circuit here, at least close to the Puget Sound area. I don't have an Eastern Washington event scheduled the next about 10 days that I'm aware of. But again, I anticipate, just because I didn't bring my written list with me, there's probably a couple things that I'm leaving off of. And I know there's several more Doge Washington training classes that I'm doing in the King County area later on this month. So I know there's quite a few of these different things. Let's get into some of these questions here as we dive into this. Just for a quick heads up, because this was kind of the teaser comment that I had for tonight's live stream. If any of you aren't aware, and I'm making a video about this, in fact, I'm actually doing the video after I'm done with this live stream, about the guy that went and the arsonist at the Capitol on Sunday. His name was Gunnar Schubert, I believe. And it turns out, and this is, as I was kind of getting into this story, because it was kind of an interesting story to me about how this guy so easily broke into the state capitol so quickly, and in a 10-minute spree managed to start a fire, damage a piano, smash a window, knock over some statues, and caused quite a bit of damage. And they say it was apparently a mental health breakdown of some kind. And I kind of looked into the guy's background as best I could look at it. And it turns out the guy went to Thomas Jefferson High School. So go Raiders. Well represented here for the Capitol City arsonist here, Capitol building arsonist. The one thing to note, I mean, it was kind of sad because I did look up this guy's Instagram account. I didn't see a Facebook account, although maybe he has one there too. But because one of the questions that came up in his court hearing yesterday is what his motivation was, whether he's political or not. I don't think so, just judging from kind of the posts that he had on his Instagram account. He did seem to be, one of the last posts that he had on his Instagram account, he was wearing the cast that he was arrested in. So it was probably pretty close to the time that he went up and started the fire up there. But it also, he was rambling on about crypto. He was rambling on, you could interpret what he said as being anti-Trump, pro-socialist, pro-union, but kind of. I mean, there was also some other statements in there that didn't make a lot of sense. So I have no idea. It's kind of sad because, again, as somebody who also went to Thomas Jefferson High School, basically, at least when I went there, and he's graduated, he's a lot younger than I am, but it was the Trailer Park High School, Federal Way, even though if you look up his bio, it says Jefferson High School in Auburn, but that's Thomas Jefferson High School, and it's in the Federal Way School District. And he sounded like he was a great athlete. He was a drafted baseball player that went and played in the kind of B squad for the Marlins for a year back in 2018, 2019 down in Florida. And if you've ever played high school sports, and he'd also gone to Gonzaga and played baseball there. So really he went from Thomas Jefferson High School, played baseball at Gonzaga, got drafted to the Marlins, went down there at least for a couple years and played. He actually has a baseball card out. But to see somebody kind of fall that far from where he was not that long ago, it's kind of a sad thing, actually, and it's kind of a sad story is what it sounds like. But the other weird thing about that was the fact that he got off with no bail at all in Thurston County. So apparently you can break into the Capitol and start a fire there. No bail, and you'd be far better off being, I guess it's safer for you to be an arsonist in the Capitol building than it would be for you to have a protest in Washington, D.C. So this is kind of and it was kind of weird too because the Chehalis Chronicle had really a pretty thorough article about this whole story, and I appreciate their story because right below it was another story of another arsonist in Chehalis who had tried to set fire to a building, family member's building that he was being evicted out of, and he had a criminal background as well. This guy, unfortunately, this Gunnar Schubert guy also had a criminal background, although it wasn't super dramatic criminal, just either possessing a weapon and 3 other criminal trespass situations in multiple counties. Schubert seems to have bounced around a lot of counties, getting in trouble in Washington State. But the other guy in Chehalis that was also in court at the same time. So one's in Thurston County, which is the capital arsonist, and he gets off no bail. Please don't do it again, or be more effective next time. It's hard to know what Judge Lanise really means when he's doing that. And then looking at the Lewis County judge, who basically threw the book at this other arsonist, who was also a criminal, but or had a criminal background, but probably a little bit more dramatic than Gunnar Schubert did, a little bit more significant criminal background. That guy had a $500,000 bond. So a little bit difference between Lewis and Thurston County. Judges do make a difference. And in Thurston County, it's anything goes. Usually they like to release criminals, no matter how violent they are, as quick as they can out of the court system so that they get a chance to go do create more victims in the time that they're out. Hopefully that doesn't happen with this Gunnar Schubert guy, but go Raiders. TJ represented all the way. Not exactly the kind of thing that the alumni newsletter will probably put out in their next letter to high school grads. So let's jump into some of the questions that people had here, and let's get into it. First question that I see here is from Dan Woolett. I'm going to take my glasses off just to make this a little bit easier to read. And has our dear governor made it back to King County yet? And the answer is probably as of today. They've been tight-lipped on exactly where it is. Governor Waldo, Governor Ferguson, has been over the last 10 days or so. We know he disappeared without letting anybody know, except for the lieutenant governor, because Denny Heck was in charge. In fact, Denny Heck was in charge when the Capitol arsonist, Gunnar Schubert, broke in and started the fire at the Capitol. And so that's why you saw some of the early comments about the damage that he did was actually from Denny Heck, our lieutenant governor, who's acting governor. But I think Bob Ferguson might have entered Washington State airspace sometime recently, probably traveling in style on the state jet, wherever it is that he went. We will find out later when we do the records request on his security team, since the governor's office is notoriously not transparent and usually conceals a lot of information from the public. So we'll have to go through the Washington State Patrol who provided security and find out where the receipts and the per diem expenses actually were spent. And that'll give us a sense of exactly where it was that he did travel. Most likely, though, according to his spokesperson, he was supposedly on some kind of vacation / some kind of conference, maybe the World Economic Forum, I don't know, maybe meeting with other governors to think about how they can hate Trump a little bit more and resist Trump. Who knows? It's a weird time to take a vacation since he does have a kid in school, and normally you don't pull him out of school for your vacations, and it's a little weird to go on vacation totally on your own, but who knows? It is Governor Ferguson, and nothing ever has to make sense with this guy. And but in theory, he's back now, so not that that does our state any good, but it may be possible for us to know that he's actually in the state. That doesn't mean he's going to be in the Capitol, because he is basically zooming it in. The governorship is basically a Zoom call program for him right now, because he lives in King County, isn't moving into the governor's mansion, and he's really not living in Olympia either. Which brings up a constitutional question that we can address at some point in time, because in theory, governors, and there's a number of different positions actually, governors, lieutenant governors, secretaries of state, attorney generals, and others have to live in theory in the capital when you're in elected office. Obviously, you can travel somewhere else, but you're supposed to live there. And obviously, he hasn't been ever in Olympia. The last 12 years as attorney general, he's been calling it in from Olympia, from his home up in Olympia, when he showed up at all. So we'll have to see. That's a great question, though. Thank you so much for asking that one. Let's jump on down to a question from Kiko Kiko. Is Washington State concerned at all about geoengineering? It's being heavily implemented in my area daily, and I don't know what area you're in, so let me know what you're talking about. They've banned it in 5 states. Is this on anyone's radar? I don't know that it's on anybody's radar in elected position, really, in Washington State. Usually geoengineering, usually referring to mostly manipulation for rain, I think, generally. I'm not sure that that's not really on anybody's radar. People will talk about it sometimes, so you're more than welcome to bring it up and start asking some of the legislators, though. I'd be curious to see what they would say, but it is not something that I heard much about. Brian B., this is a good question because it's going to be part of the topic here. Were you at this signing event in Tumwater on Saturday? And the question is, no, I wasn't there, although I did have a bunch of friends there, and I got a bunch of photos from that event sent to me. So that was one of the other things I was going to talk about during this live stream, because as people know, on Saturday, the Let's Go Washington folk had an event at the Tumwater Middle School, which is over on Little Rock Road, I believe, and it was well attended by people who were there to support the Girls in Sports Initiative, as well as the Restore Parental Consent, or actually Communication with Parents initiative, both of which are strongly opposed by the Democrat Party in Washington State. And a lot of people showed up to speak. There was a 16-year-old girl who was an athlete who spoke at that event and had to be guarded by security from the 30 or so kind of Antifa type people who came to try to disrupt the event. They were banging on pots and pans and yelling and doing all their usual crazy stuff. And in light of the Charlie Kirk event and the likelihood that the left is kind of going down this dark hole of violence wherever they can, there were a lot of people there, and they surrounded this girl to protect her from the inevitable violence that always seems to come with Antifa right now. So, but at this point in time, everybody was able to stay safe. And that event went off pretty well. They got a lot of signatures there. And of course, it's also, if you're tracking all of the random assaults that are happening and attacks on signature gatherers all over Washington State, you can tell that the left has created just an unhinged subculture within their group that just is going to mandate violence. There were a couple of other stories over the weekend. One of them was in Covington, where a guy came up to destroy or steal I think he came up and stole the signature sheets from the signature gatherer, and the police were called, and they did arrest the guy. arrest the guy, kind of. And the body cam video came out. Actually, this would have been from a couple weeks ago because they just got the body cam video. And I saw Brandy Cruz did a story on it. I saw Jason Rance was talking about it as well. I should say I heard that he was. And I heard part of what they were talking about. But it was clear that the Covington Police Department needs to be a little bit more educated on exactly what First Amendment protections are, because collecting signatures is a First Amendment protected right in Washington State very clearly. It has been since 1912 when the state constitution was changed. And although the left used to support that idea, they don't support it when somebody's collecting signatures for something they disagree with. In that case, all holds are, there's no restriction, of course, and the left believes violence is perfectly appropriate for them. The problem with this was that the deputy or the police officer clearly put this guy in handcuffs, but in the body cam video you can hear him say, "Hey, this is just for show, I'm going to let you go, don't worry about it." And that generated a lot of negative pushback, because if the police can't be trusted to actually enforce the law and prosecute people, or at least put charges on somebody who's going to go out and try to suppress other people's free speech, then that simply invites and encourages more people to do it. So that's what's going on right now. It sounds like there's a wide, everywhere I've been, people have been collecting signatures for this thing. And I was at several events last week, and everywhere I went, they've been widely accepted, and a lot of people seem to be signing them. Later on that night, I was up in Bellevue. Part of the reason, by the way, why I wasn't there, we just had a big apple pressing, and I was trying to make a bunch of cider, and once you kind of get going on that process, I just couldn't get away from it. I'm not that far, actually, away from Tumwater, but so I'm sorry I missed the people who showed up there, but trust me, there's going to be plenty of events like that all over the state. I'm going to hit as many of them as I can while I'm out and about, but a lot's going on, and if you haven't been to one of these events, they're worth going to. And I think that Let's Go Washington people are going to do a lot of these at schools, even though in that case Tumwater gave them permission to come inside and do the event, and then they put them outside where the Antifa people can get at them a little bit more easily. And fortunately, with security there and everything, they were able to keep that from happening. So anyway, never a dull moment. Good question here. The next question from Rich. 410 Bridge, 167 Bridge. Could the CDL drivers speak English? Excellent question. A number of people are filing records requests on those situations. And of course, in both cases, to my knowledge, DOT, the Department of Transportation, WashDOT, is actually slow to get back with any records, so I don't have an answer to that. Particularly the 410 bridge, there's a lot of questions about the driver that struck that bridge and basically destroyed it. I'm sorry if you live out there, because I was talking to some people recently about how difficult that has made the commute out to Buckley and some other areas in that kind of part of our state. And there once was a time when Washington State knew how to repair bridges and build them. Those days are generally long gone. Now we know how to waste a lot of money, and sometimes it takes us a long time now to get around to actually putting up a bridge or knowing how to build one in any kind of economical or efficient way. So we will have to see. Let's see. I'm going to jump down to the next question here. Jason Fisher. Hey, Glenn, I hope you are well. Will we National Guard in Seattle? I'm sorry, I think what you meant is will we have National Guard in Seattle? And the same anti-gun judge in Oregon who green-lighted the ballot measures, blocked Trump deployment, acted pretty fast at night. Yeah, so that's not as clear a question as I need when you're going to ask a question, but I'm assuming what you're asking is, will the National Guard be deployed in Seattle? And I don't know. I mean, to be honest, the Antifa violence and the leftist violence right now, for whatever reason, has been mostly focused on the ICE facility in Portland in a more dramatic way. The ICE facility down in Tacoma, which is where I think the main detention facilities are, or the Boeing field where they do a lot of the extradition flights and they send the deportees of illegal aliens back to their home countries. Both of those were the two locations I thought that they were doing some protests up in Washington State, but they just apparently haven't been anywhere near what they were experiencing in Portland. Obviously, if you had tracked what some of the protests were like back in 2020 or 2021, I mean, it was much more dramatic and much more significant than it is now. It's not good now, and it's bad. Anybody who's paid attention to Katie Davenport and some of these other people have been reporting on it down there. There's a lot of violence that's occurred in the Portland area in particular. What's more troubling, though, than the violence at the left, which is pretty much the only thing they know, is the way that the police have been basically not being, you can't rely on them to protect you. In fact, the police seem to sit around, and the only people that they were arresting were actually conservative people there taking video. That being said, Friday, a ton of conservative high school students showed up, surrounded the ICE facility, and were cheering them on and supporting them. So I hadn't seen that in a long time. Didn't expect that either in Portland. And so I think we're really seeing some unusual shifts and changes going on out there right now. The whole National Guard deployment question is a little absurd on its face, but I think the Trump administration is purposely triggering some of the more absurd cases so that they can run this up through the Supreme Court. And the first saying that they were going to have the Oregon National Guard come out, and the judge said no. So then they said, well, then fine, we'll have the California National Guard come out, and they'll say no. I've heard that the Washington State National Guard was going to go down there, but I haven't heard the same type of legal fight going on here. And then you also saw that Texas offered their National Guard up for deployment to Chicago. Again, we're kind of treading in this unusual place because if anybody's paid any attention in the past, there have been the use of National Guard in Washington, D.C. is perfectly legal, and there is no doubt, right? The use of National Guard in Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is a federal construct that was created by the feds, for the feds, and the feds can intervene whenever they want there, essentially, the way it's been set up. It gets a little grayer and a little bit more questionable when you talk about deploying National Guard or military anywhere else in the U.S. When you're going to defend a federal building, as it looks like they're doing in Portland, it looks pretty clear to me generally that the feds have a right to do that. However, when it goes to become supporting law enforcement in Illinois and they don't want their help, probably it's a little bit harder. Now, you saw Memphis. They also did the same thing out in Memphis, but there you had the governor actually intervene and request it, and so you have cooperation. I'm not sure that the mayor of Memphis was as cooperative, but the governor in that case certainly was. And it does raise an interesting question, which is that when you have egregiously incompetent and corrupt local officials, as they clearly do have in Illinois, as they clearly have in Portland, at what point, how many people have to die, how bad does that have to get before the federal government can come in and actually intervene? To some extent, I mean, I'm simplifying this a lot, but this is going to be where these legal questions ultimately lead to, is this where the role of the federal government can be or where it wouldn't be. Obviously, the Democrats have no interest in actually fixing their crime problems, and they're really defending, hands off our crime kind of attitude. It doesn't really seem like a great political move to me, but that's where we're at. So we will see where it goes. Sorry, there's a ton of questions, and I need to keep jumping down here. T-Blaze, so you can set the Capitol building on fire and get cashless bail. Crazy. Yeah, absolutely. Apparently so. The judge, actually, Judge Lanise, who should know better, basically came out and said, yeah, that's not a violent thing. Arson is violence. I'm sorry. When you go to start a fire, the amount of damage and destruction you can have is horrific, and just letting somebody go. Listen, they're going to try to argue that the guy had a mental health breakdown, which it could very well be. I don't want to beat up on the guy specifically. I don't know his story. It looks like he's fallen a long ways from when he was a drafted semi-pro baseball player not that long ago. So something's sad there. But anyway, we'll see how it goes. Let's see. Let's go down here. ITA, SCOTUS, the Supreme Court of the United States, refused to hear the case against the carbon market. What's the next step? CATF is suing. Will that go nowhere too? We are not getting our money's worth nor a decreased pollutants. And thanks for pointing out that the Supreme Court did refuse that first lawsuit against carbon markets. Listen, this is what happens. I've seen this at the federal court level, so have you probably. You can have a dozen cases that are on roughly the same issue, and they're going to pick the one that seems to have a fact pattern that's going to help them determine, try to put the issue to bed as quick as they can. At least I'm simplifying it, but that's essentially sort of how the Supreme Court would work. And it could be that there's other cases that will be coming through the court system that may more appropriately help them address this issue. If you've not noticed, the Supreme Court is actually completely overwhelmed with lots of crazy cases going on right now, as a lot of significant issues are kind of determined there. There's nothing I dislike more than having to rely on a couple of black robe people anywhere. It doesn't matter if I agree with them or not. You have a system that's not working great if that's where you have to go to get every single political dispute resolved. That's still better than having the dispute resolved in the way that the left apparently wants to do it, with violence in the streets. But it's still it's not, doesn't speak well generally for having a lot of divisions and problems out there. Of course, remember, if you want to go and apparently, kill a Supreme Court justice, they're also not going to throw the book at you either, as you saw recently with the very light sentence given to the guy that tried to come out and assassinate Kavanaugh. So, that judge definitely made a very poor choice in that decision as well. Here's a question from Berserker, sort of. I'm mispronouncing that, but that's close enough. Should Washington State GOP focus on providing other options other than vote by mail only before anything else? Listen, I definitely would replace vote by mail with an in-person voting. One of the things that you would have to go through, and this is a fairly practical issue you'd have to address, if you're going to replace vote by mail, you have to go back to precinct level, sort of. And when I say precinct, doesn't mean you only have one location per precinct, but you might have one that does 3 or 4 precincts. But regardless, you have to go to in-person voting at some location. The most practical way to do that is to use the schools as a precinct for voting. And the more practical way to ensure that you're not preventing people from being able to vote would be to declare it a national holiday on Election Day, so that anybody who wants to can go out and actually vote. There's also, though, a distributed model of voting and training, and it won't be quite as simple as people think, but it would be something that we can do. If India can basically count far more votes than our nation's ever counted in an election cycle, by 3 times, and they can do it in a couple days, then I think Washington State could, with the anemic and ridiculously small amount of votes that we do have in our state. It's not, even if you had 4 million votes, that is not a big number of votes to count. Florida does it right now with 11, 12 million votes. So do a number of other states. We're not the largest state. We're one of the dumbest states when it comes to how we set up our election system, but we're certainly not one of the largest. So it is very possible to do it. You'd have to plan ahead. You would probably, schools are the most logical. One of the things you have to make sure is you still will have mail-in voting for deployed overseas military and their dependents. And maybe a small, highly disabled people that literally can't leave their place. Maybe. But that would be it. And otherwise, that would allow us to actually, instead of having the Count Till Christmas program and the problem with the post office right now, which has come in the news lately, that a lot of the ballots that get sent in late will probably be rejected because there won't be a postmark on it. Now, unfortunately, that's either an invitation to further abuse the election system by saying, well, we don't need a postmark because this could happen. But it's just further evidence that the lack of chain of custody and outsourcing the election process to random other bureaucracies who may or may not have any level of skill or concern about whether they botch everything up or they corrupt it or they put their thumb on the scales, like the post office, does introduce a whole host of other problems to the election process. We need to go back to in-person voter ID. I think that's it's not a panacea, it's not perfect. Anybody who thinks there's a perfect voting system is delusional, but it's certainly better than the worst system that you can find, which is the one we currently have. And we should start making plans for what that's going to look like. And I think with the number of the stories that are probably going to be coming out in Washington State and elsewhere around the country about the deficiencies and defectiveness of the mail-in voting systems, I suspect that's inevitably where we're going to go. There was a comment here by Sphinx, and I appreciate you pointing this in. It's not a question, but I'll point it out and reemphasize what I said earlier here about how the city of Covington's under contract with King County for police. Good point. And obviously, the King County Police Department needs to do a better job with training their deputies. Now, the other thing, of course, is that the King County now is the only unelected sheriff in Washington State. 39 counties, only one county has an unelected sheriff, and that's King County. And we don't want any more. They've had it before. They went back to an elected sheriff for a while. That's when Reichert was actually there back in the day. And now they've gone back to an unelected sheriff. You're allowed to do that if you set up home rule charters. 7 counties in Washington State are under what's called a home rule charter. It's a change to the state constitution back in 1949 that allowed a reorganization of county governance from the standard commission model, home rule charter model. I've done videos about this before. That's just why I know it off the top of my head. I'm generally opposed to charter, home rule charter options. They promise a lot. They fail to deliver on every promise they have. And one thing they always do is increase taxes and bloat the size of the bureaucracy. If those are outcomes that you enjoy having, then absolutely go down the home rule charter model, but otherwise avoid it like the plague that it ends up becoming every time. That being said, if you're already in a home rule charter county, get on those charter review commissions, because every 5 or 10 years, depending on which county you're in, they definitely use that as a way to abuse people who live there as well, and special interests take advantage of that to manipulate the legal structure of your county. And taking the sheriff and making them an appointed position is one way to ensure that you no longer have the independence or even concern to the voters who live in the county by the sheriff anymore. Then the sheriff's totally lost. And again, many of the critiques you're going to see here is the political influence in the King County Sheriff's Department. And if the city of Covington is outsourcing their sheriff's department, or I should say contracting with the King County Sheriff's Department for the law enforcement, then inevitably going to have this problem. They're not the only city. I think SeaTac does. I thought Burien did. Newcastle used to sometimes. My dad was a founding member of the city of Newcastle, and he was on the city council for a while, so I remember they would contract out sometimes with Renton and sometimes with King County Sheriff's Department, but a number of cities do. The same things in Thurston, Pierce, any of these bigger jurisdictions. When you have small towns, it's oftentimes more efficient for them to contract out with the sheriff's department, because they can train their deputies better. The deputies are technically working for the city at that time, but they're contracted out, and that's a contract they usually negotiate frequently. I don't want to go down too far down the rabbit hole about contracted police services, but essentially that's how it works. Good point. Thanks for bringing it up, because that is sort of relevant to the debate around this Covington officer and his lack of awareness that signature gatherers are protected activity. Chaz E. Here's a question. Why can't signature gatherers use firearms to protect their First Amendment rights? If the police won't do their jobs, vigilantism seems to be justified. Okay, well, I really don't want to see signature gatherers shooting people for coming up and harassing them. I think that's probably not the optimal outcome that you would get here, but clearly you do raise one of the questions, which is when the police and law enforcement seem to abandon their positions, then inevitably you have situations like this that even get asked, because the police can't be relied on. Obviously, a signature gatherer can protect themselves. In Washington State, you can't use firearms to protect your property specifically. I mean, that's not a specific thing. So in other words, if somebody comes up and I caught a guy stealing stuff on my property, I can't just go out and shoot him. You're not allowed to do that in the state. If the guy's dumb enough to charge and attack you, then he can be shot, and it's justifiable self-defense, as I experienced a few years ago. Some of you might know. But the vigilantism is really what we don't want, and although I think the left would want that, because I think that's why they're continually trying to erode the legal system, and that's not a road we want to go down. We do want to fix whatever's broken in the legal system first. T.Z. Burton, question. Yesterday the Capitol Rotunda was vandalized. Bob even commented, will somebody ask him about the violence against conservative signature gatherers? Yes, they will, and he's already been asked about that. And actually, he did make a comment. It was a Chat GPT statement that I think he made about how, not really specifically, it was just saying that they, violence of any kind will not be accepted in the political process, something like that. Bob Ferguson may be forced to come around and finally renounce violence on the left, but I'm sure he'll use some weasel words like he usually does. Secretary of State Hobbs has actually come out with a more clearer statement recently. He's done it actually twice recently, and his second one was a little bit clearer about how, and it kind of matters a little bit more for the Secretary of State because they're directly involved in, and their employees are involved in, when you do the handoff of the signature sheets in Tumwater, you're handing them to the Secretary of State's office there, and so his office is directly involved in that, and so he did come out and he was very specifically saying that to report him to law enforcement. Now, obviously, the Democrats don't care so much about violence against any conservatives in the state. They've repeatedly and endlessly, they have a double standard, they always have, but sometimes you can force them to say and admit that maybe violence isn't the optimal solution for political disagreement, sometimes. Chaz E., can't we sue the police departments so that they do their jobs? That's a good question. I mean, there's a way you can do that, kind of, but there was a famous case, I know I covered this, and I can't remember the name of the case. It came out of New York City, actually, back in the 60s, if I remember right. And it was a famous case where a woman was raped and murdered and killed in an alley and had been screaming for help, and tons of people called the police, and the police never showed up. So she was murdered, and the guy got away with it for a while. They did catch him, and he was prosecuted later. And none of the people intervened. So there were two parts of that story. Number one, nobody actually stepped out to try to save her. But number two, the police never showed up. So the police were sued. And ultimately, that ended up falling under the category, according to the court system at the time, where they basically said the police are under no obligation to necessarily come out and protect you every time. They actually are more likely to get in trouble if they come out and they make a mistake. Then they're definitely, it's like a crime of commission versus omission. So you can't sue the police department generally for not doing their job. You can probably sue them if they do their job poorly or they cause harm in doing their job. And anybody in law enforcement's pretty familiar with this. That being said, most people don't get into law enforcement because they don't want to do the job, but you do have political leadership like we do, unfortunately, in King County Sheriff's Department, where it's becoming questionable as to exactly how serious that sheriff is about prosecuting criminals at all. Most of the time, most of the sheriffs that I'm familiar with in Washington State have been very much in favor of reducing the amount of crime in their communities and actually putting people in jail who are bad guys. The conflict tends to come more at the prosecutor's office, where they have to make determinations on who they prosecute, and even more significantly in Washington State with the judges, who have tended to be very soft on crime judges. George Soros has been highly active in Washington State with both prosecutors and judges in influencing them, and that kind of movement that he supported to keep putting criminals back out on the street. Same thing they used to do in the 60s and 70s and 80s, same problem. And that it's just kind of, it's a constant theme that the left has about, and they're terribly wrong, and most people disagree with it, but a lot of people don't realize that's how it gets here. The next question comes in here. There's a comment here, and let me see if this, a lot of that with bridge and road repair. Okay. Let's see, I'm going to go down here. Jason Fisher, here's a question. Will we start seeing bills being pre-filed for 2026 legislative session? And the answer is yes. Although one thing I'm going to point out, and then second part of that question that Jason was asking here is, Portland condition is pretty shocking. Is Seattle just as bad? Okay, so let me go to the pre-filed bills. And by this time, yes, you should start seeing some pre-filed bills. And there will be some. The one thing to remember that we're going into a short session. No accident, an easy way to remember this is that if there's an election that year, a normal, regular every 2 years, the regular election cycle for all the legislators and half the senators in our state, that is always a short session year, which means it's essentially a 60-day session. That means that they're a little less likely to process anywhere near the volume of bills and legislation that usually doesn't come out of Olympia in the same kind of volume that you do in a long session, which is what we just got out of here in 2025. So the 2026 session starting in January is going to be a short session. One of the easy ways to remember it is that politicians need to run for office, and they want to, when they're in session, this is a great law, by the way, while they're in session, they can't accept campaign finance contributions, and that really kind of cramps their style, and it constrains what they can do. And so the legislature doesn't like that, and they want to quickly go out. They got challengers who are raising money and who are campaigning against them every day, and they're stuck in session, and they can't do anything about it. And so they really want to get back out there on the campaign road. And so if you want to encourage the legislature to get out on time and get the heck out of Olympia, make sure that they know that they have got a lot of competition out there in the field, and there's going to be people running against them who are serious, and they don't need a drool cup to function in public, but they're actually out there running a real campaign against them. That's going to encourage legislators to get done as quick as possible and get out there and hit the road. Remember, the Democrats dominate both houses in Washington State. There are 2 Senate seats right now that are very important in this off-year election. The 26th Ledge District, which is the Gig Harbor, mainly centered on kind of Gig Harbor area, with Michelle Caldeer, the Republican, running, and it's a potential upset. The Democrats could lose that seat, and that would add a Republican to the Senate, which would be very helpful. You have another race in the 5th Ledge District, out in the Issaquah, kind of Enumclaw area, where Chad Moggendaw, the Republican, is also challenging the incumbent. And the incumbent's really an appointed person because the former senator died while on a run out in Issaquah. And so, and the 26th, the reason why it's a special election going on out there is that the former incumbent was elected to Congress, where she can plague that D.C., that's Washington, instead of our state. So you got these 2 open seats right now that are actually very competitive. The Republicans have a chance of prevailing in those seats, provided there's a legitimate turnout of Republicans. The primary race numbers were very, very low, probably some of the smallest turnouts we've seen in a long, long time. And it's not just because the illegals weren't voting. It was just a small turnout. So it is worth knowing that if you live in those 2 races, those 2 districts, your vote really matters, and get another 40 people that agree with you to vote. I mean, really work hard to get those votes in. It's going to make a difference. But the short session probably means that they may file a bunch of bills, but not a lot of bills tend to get out this time of year. The bigger fight this short session is clearly going to be the budget. The disastrous budget from 2025 has already fallen off a cliff. Probably by that time it'll be about $1 billion underwater, and the budget, they're hitting the red as far as collecting, spending more money than they're collecting. Then that just leads to a cascade of Democrat Party meltdown and bureaucracy and grant grifting operations that are concerned about their future, and everybody's going to be fighting over that issue. And it is important to be involved and engaged on this one. We are approaching some interesting inflection points in Washington State, and so things could start changing pretty quickly. Chazzy, do you know the threshold of violence necessary to enact the Insurrection Act? This is a good question, and I was reading about this recently because Donald Trump has brought this to the forefront again, saying that he would consider invoking the Insurrection Act to justify bringing military people out, or whether that's the National Guard or the military, to come in and restore order in places where things have gotten out of control. The last time this was done, I was in college. This was in 1992. It was during the LA riots after Rodney King drama went down, and there were lots of riots, really significant riots, widespread in the city at the time. And that was the last time the Insurrection Act was invoked. And both the president and the governor at the time, I believe, were engaged in making sure that the National Guard got involved and restored order in Los Angeles. And so it's very possible it could be invoked again. That's the last time. That's been a while since it's been invoked. By the way, since it was created, it's been invoked about 30 times, is what I read. So it isn't super unusual that it would be invoked. Obviously, it got invoked a number of times back in the 60s and 70s. We just haven't done it in a long time, so probably younger generations will be like the first time you see it, assuming they actually do it. There is no real formal legal threshold for that definition. There's generic language if you read the bill, so we'll see. But it could happen. Let's see. T.G. Burton, why are two countries applying bail, counties is what you meant. Why are two counties applying bail differently? How can we have blind justice with biased justices? Well, this has always been the case. In fact, long before you were born, or my grandparents were born, or my great-great-grandparents were born in this state and their country, the reality is there's a big difference between judges in how they prosecute cases. There's always been a big difference. So you would have judges that are more strict and criminals don't do as well in those situations. And then you have judges that are very lenient and they'll release criminals early or give them much lighter sentences, for example. This has been going on a long, long time. It's nothing new. What was interesting about the cases that I contrasted was really the fact that they were both essentially arson cases, same time. Nobody died in either case. Nobody was physically assaulted in either case. Both people had criminal records, and both of them were treated substantially different, and they're in neighboring counties, which is Lewis and Thurston. And so I thought that contrast was interesting. Inevitably, what the judges would say is, well, the guy down in Lewis County, he had an active warrant for his arrest for other criminal activity, and so we're concerned about him fleeing the country. He doesn't speak English, for example. They could say that. And that there's some legitimate things that maybe they think that guy's more of a flight risk. Maybe Gunnar Schubert up here, the Capitol City Capitol building arsonist, even though he has had some criminal history, it's not maybe as dramatic, and it was just 3 criminal trespassing in 3 different counties, which is impressive. Plus there was another criminal, about 4 criminal cases, and it was like Franklin County. It was a number of different Eastern Washington counties. He's gone around the state, fairly impressive, probably more back when he was at Gonzaga. But nevertheless, they could say, okay, well, he's very likely to be showing up, or he's less likely to not be showing up. Although I have to tell you, it's highly weird. And when you see the video of him, it's posted on the DES website. I'll link to it in the video I produced about the story. But you can see him walking around the Capitol, just breaking random things and throwing the county flags off of the rotunda kind of middle area. It's a weird and surreal thing to watch, especially if you spend any time in the Capitol and you've gone here walking around. You know exactly where he's at. I mean, these are places I visited dozens and dozens, probably hundreds of times in some cases, and to see him just randomly destroying things in kind of a unfocused sort of way. I mean, thank God he wasn't like a hardcore focused with a mission, I'm going to go burn down the Capitol, because he could have easily done that. With the amount of lighter fluid he still had on him, he definitely could have done it. I have no idea what this guy was. I mean, they said it was a mental health breakdown, and I'm sure that's his story and he's sticking to it, but that was pretty crazy. Let's see. Good point, Knight Wolf here. If it had been a Trump supporter, they'd be thrown in the stockade with no bail. That's absolutely true. And Judge Lanise would definitely be the guy who did it. Remember, Judge Lanise is the judge who said that Tim Eyman's $8.5 million judgment against him is perfectly appropriate for the crime of collecting signatures and reducing our taxes. So none of these are not honest judges. Thurston County doesn't have any honest judges, so you'll never get a fair hearing in Thurston County. And it's one of the reasons why it's probably worth doing a little bit of work there to actually make sure we replace the corrupt judges we have and at least get some honest ones in there that care about the rule of law, holding government accountable, and certainly putting criminals in jail. Jack Palder, apparently we have more Dems in the state and crooked vote by mail, along with little empathy from D.C. Will it get better here in our lifetime? And of course the answer is yes, but also remember, we are a small fish in a big pond right now with a bunch of big fish that are running around getting a little bit more attention because of the fact they are big fish. California, Illinois, New York come to mind right away. Massachusetts, these are bigger states. Bigger fights are going on there. However, I will point out Oregon is in court right now at the Department of Justice. I kind of anticipate Washington shortly, if not this week, but the new DOJ, if you notice, it was an immigration judge that just got appointed to the head of the Seattle District Office. I think he was sworn in yesterday. I don't remember his name off the top of my head, but he was an immigration judge here in our state, and now he is the head DOJ guy. It wasn't on my original list, so I'm curious to see what he does. But now that you have a DOJ acting attorney, federal attorney running the Seattle office, you're probably more likely to see some of these cases start to proceed. And I can't imagine the Trump administration would be putting this guy in unless he was serious about trying to enforce the law in Washington state. So we'll see. I actually think there could be a lot of big changes if they do fix vote by mail, especially if we go back to in-person voting. And they clean up the voter rolls, which is even more important. Ray Stewart, you had a question here about how we used to have precinct voting, and that's true, we did. The framework is there. What is the problem? Well, the problem is just simply going to be a logistics issue. Remember, the one thing is that you can't conceive of incompetence, even the definition of incompetence, until you've actually run into people who work for the government. And then you'll suddenly understand that no matter how incompetent somebody is, government has the ability to produce a greater level of incompetence than anybody's ever conceived in any other human organizing principle. And so there's incompetence, there's stupidity, there's corruption, and it's all combined together. We call it the bureaucracy, and they will find ways to screw everything up, just like they do right now in almost every other area of any place that they touch. I mean, anywhere they go. So every time you think you've developed a theory of just how incompetent and stupid and bad these guys really are, they'll find some new way to plumb a lower depth of failure than what you ever saw before. So one thing about precinct level voting is that you do need to break a lot of distinct entities with a lot of observers all around the state simultaneously running their offices. Yes, many states do that now that are much larger and more complex than ours, but the muscle memory is no longer there, at least on the established side of things. And so the question becomes, how exactly do you run it, and how would they get it up and running? I was giving you a couple of simple examples to overcome the basic issues. The American with Disabilities Act was one of the things that's cited sometimes because back when they had precinct level voting and the ADA was passed, the grandfather clause in a number of different locations that weren't ADA compliant, but most schools today are ADA compliant, which eliminates the ADA compliance issue and the precinct level location issue. And if it's a holiday, then schools would be available for this type of work in their gyms or wherever it is that you would do it. So, and most people do know roughly where their schools are located. Listen, they aren't educating kids very well right now. We might as well put the infrastructure to use for something. So anyway, that's how we do it. Let's keep going down here, guys. I see a bunch of different comments here, but I'm going to try to get to the questions because there's clearly a bunch of questions. Jason Fisher, are there any seats that Republicans can add in the legislature, or will the Dem majority continue to grow? Will we finally defeat Perez in the 3rd Congressional District? There's actually three different questions there. Clearly, there are a bunch of seats in the state legislature and in the Senate that the Republicans could pick up because of both changing demographics in those districts and also the margin of the difference between Republicans and Democrats in those districts it's pretty close. There's I would classify about 8 of them, which means that equates to 16 potential seats, which is more than enough to shift the balance of power quite a bit in the House. The Senate, usually because it overlaps with it, basically every ledge district, there's 49 of them. You have 2 House seats and 1 Senate seat. The complicating thing for the Senate side is just that the Senate is every 4 years. Half of them are every 4 years, and so they're all every 4 years, but they're basically sequenced so that only half are going to be on the ballot each year. It's not exactly half, but it's roughly half each election cycle every 2 years. Now, we have a special election right now, which is why those 2 races that I mentioned earlier are very important. And then you have 98 legislative seats. There's 2 legislators for every 1 senator, same district. And so usually you don't have split districts. But you also have to look at like the demographics and voting patterns, the trend changes that are occurring right now, and where you have a little bit better chance of winning in some of these races. You have a number of different seats: Whatcom County out on the peninsula, which is the 24th ledge district seat. You have a number of different seats in the Snohomish County area and in Pierce County. That I think you got a reasonable chance of potentially flipping seats there. You do have to run legitimate campaigns. Again, you have to have candidates that are serious about running for office and have some level of name recognition. They don't need a drool cup to function in public, and also they just know how to raise money, and they have a good reason for why they're running. Random people that appear out of nowhere to run for office aren't attractive to anybody generally. It doesn't really matter. If the Christmas card list is 12 people when you start out and decide to run for office, you have a massive mountain to climb before you're going to get name recognition enough that anybody in your community even knows who you are. So that's hard to get. And so you have to have the time to plan is now, and the time to find the candidates like that is now. And then make sure they're not running because it's an ego project, or they had a vision, and they're totally unprepared, whatever. You want to at least stack the deck a little bit better in your favor by having good, capable, articulate, effective, knowledgeable candidates who will not be watching Oprah on a Friday night, right? And instead, they're going to be out there actually doorbelling, knocking on doors in the rain, doing the hard work to actually get out there and earn the election. I am stunned and amazed at the just flat-out laziness that exists among a lot of people who run for office. They have no idea what this process is involved. It's very, very difficult if you run hard, and there's no guarantees. So anyway, I'm sorry, I'm on my soapbox there. Jeff John, 9898, is the government shutdown cover for eliminating non-essential government employees? Dear Lord, I hope so. Because if I was in the federal government right now, I would be not hesitating at all. I did notice, by the way, that they just pushed through a bunch of appointees that have been held up before. So that's a good sign. You're using the shutdown in a way that's effective. But eliminating non-essential government employees, if it was me, I'd be firing a couple 100,000 more federal workers. This is the time to downsize a bunch of the pointless, dumb, useless agencies, cutting off contracts to grifting operations that clearly shouldn't exist. This should be viewed as the bonanza for Doge at the federal level. This is the opportunity to make massive cuts everywhere, and a shutdown is the phenomenal opportunity to do that. And the Democrats won't like it, of course. But if you looked at some of the dumb reasons, the things that they wanted to put in that led to the shutdown, I saw, was it Senator Kennedy that came out with that list of the $20 million overseas spending that they wanted to keep, and it was the most irrational, insane, wasteful, stupid projects that should just be cut out of any sane budget. And that the Democrats are willing to die on that hill. Beyond the fact that they want to give health care to illegals, it's that issue, among other issues. And so that I would just use every shutdown as an opportunity to downsize government even more. Let's see. T.Z. Burton, since the Democrats still have a most likely supermajority again, and we're still $1 billion short, and King County lost $1.5 billion. Will more taxes be coming? And this is a good question, and I suspect that regardless of the hype, I don't think they're going to have much in the way of taxes in this next session. Here's why. Historically, and this goes back decades, consistently for decades, long session is when they pass taxes. Short session is when they don't, because it's even fresher in people's mind usually. When you're coming up to the election cycle, and the Democrats are already getting a lot of blowback. I know they're getting blowback right now in the King County area in particular from a lot of people that are impacted by some of these little oddball taxes that they threw in, especially the sales tax and B&O tax on small businesses. A lot of these left-leaning sort of entrepreneurial type business people or gig economy people, which are dominantly found in kind of this Puget Sound area, are directly impacted and harmed, and in some cases their businesses are fatally harmed by dumb taxes passed with little thought, a lot of ignorance, and the egregious incompetence that largely defines the Democrats in Olympia. And the Republicans, to their credit, pretty much always voted against it. There were very few exceptions to that. And so there's a clear contrast here. One side clearly wants to extract the cash from you so that you can pay platinum prices for garbage government. And the other side is saying that that's not a good idea and they don't want to waste that money. And the contrast can't be sharper right now. Even with the worst Republican in the legislature turns out to be better than the best Democrat in the legislature. When I say best, I mean the one that's the least crazy. And so when you have that kind of a contrast, it provides an opportunity for the Republicans. to pick up the seats, to change the narrative, to be able to go out there and make a bigger impact in some of these communities that are directly impacted by it. It's easy to pretend like you're a lefty and that you're until it directly affects you and hurts you. And if you've been able to avoid the crime, if you've been able to avoid the fact that your kids are being dumbed down in school, and you may not be able to avoid now the taxes, then it starts to hurt, and pretty soon. There's a lot of people that don't consider themselves that partisan or political, but they'll start to vote for their pocketbook, and that is actually something that I do see changing periodically. Let's see. Let me go down to questions, because there are questions, and there's a lot of comments. I love the comments back and forth, but let me get to this. Let's see. Jason, again, do you think that we will see more tax increases for C-Tran in Vancouver? We see a lot of empty buses. Well, again, every train system, every mass transit program in Washington State's an incompetent disaster. Fare collection covers on average 4% of the true operating costs. So we subsidize empty buses and trains, and we've been doing that for a long, long time. Nothing's worse than Sound Transit in the Puget Sound area, the light rail disaster that they run. That's one of the greatest boondoggles Washington State's been able to cook up in actually since statehood, and the categorical failure of that system. You might be lucky in a decade if everything works out well that maybe 1% of the people ride it. Right now, it just becomes a mobile platform for meth heads and criminals to travel around and have easier access to communities they hadn't been in before. Obviously, some people still use it for commuting. It's a microscopic percentage of the population, and for the billions and billions and tens of billions that they have wasted on that and continue to waste on it, that's the worst. C-Tran is mostly this effort to take the failing and soon to be bankrupt light rail system in Vancouver or in Portland and get it across the bridge into Washington. It's one of the big dramas that's been involved in the new bridge design. Nothing's worse than a bridge that's going to accommodate light rail from a failing bankrupt Portland into Vancouver in an effort to drive down the quality of life and make life far more expensive and much more difficult for the people who live in Vancouver. The Democrats have been largely sold and bought off on this, but there's also been Republicans who've fallen for the story too. So it is a disaster. It died the CRC project last time. Now they're trying to resurrect it again. I don't know that it's going to go through quite the way that people think it will. And a lot of these mass transit projects, as the financial status in a lot of these cities gets worse, I think a lot of them are going to end up going away at some point because there's just not enough money in the world to help fund their disaster. Let's see. I'm trying to go down and find questions. A lot of comments back and forth. That's great. Make sure that you have a question mark in here or hit @WeTheGovern so I can see it. Let's see. I see this here. It's not a question, but it did flag me here. ITA said they're doing the King County budget right now, and people who live there need to comment on the hundreds of millions of dollars that they're spending on EV charging stations. That's right, the EV charging station disaster. I agree, and that's a good point. Send in your comments and tell them that you are tired of paying platinum prices for garbage government, and nobody identifies with garbage government better than the King County Council. There's only maybe one person there that believes math is real, and no more money until there's no more fraud, right? And that's not going to happen anytime soon, so just plain no more money. Vote against every single tax increase these guys ever offer you. There isn't one that's on the books right now that's rational or sane that I've been able to see so far. Jeff John, 9898. ITA, what happens to charging stations for EVs when Tesla free energy is brought out? I don't have an answer for that, but that's a great question to ask, and there is no answer that I can give you on that. Let's see, keep going down with other questions. There's a ton of comments, guys, and I'm having a hard time finding questions in here. So Anyway, I see comments about sports stadiums in here. Yes, also a good waste of money. If it's so awesome, let the billionaires build them. I don't think the government should be in that business. Let's see. All right. Anyway, that's all the comments that I see. There's a ton or I should say, there's a ton of comments. That's all the questions I see right here. Here's another one that just popped up. Oh, sorry. Maybe I'm missing some here. At the end, Jason Fisher got a quick question here. Would it be possible to do open records requests on the status of the gun permits and training program set up progress so far? Yes, it is. And I would file that records request. I don't know that you would get much back right now, but it's good to have it in process and see what they say it is. Let's see. ITA, thanks for the stream. I feel a little bit better thinking the Citizens Action Defense Fund may have a case to force the emissions data. All right, guys, there's a lot to look for. Here's a couple things that I'm going to point out as I kind of close down today's live stream. And I have some videos I got to record tonight, so it's going to be one of those nights. But the thing to just remember right now is that roughly 10% of Washington State school districts are in receivership right now. The majority of the counties are running into financial trouble. In fact, I'm unaware of any major public entity in Washington State that isn't crying about money. Now, they cry about money during the best of times, but right now there's a number of things that have all kind of come together to make things worse than normal. So number one, the COVID cash that came in back in 2020, 2021, and 2022, despite all the warnings, despite many of us who did warn them about not squandering that money on increasing the budget, but on using it exclusively for one-time things, of course, very few people listened, and they jacked up their operating costs substantially, directly related to COVID cash. And the COVID cash is running out, and of course, now they're in trouble. Layoffs are coming. There's no way to avoid it. Most places will have to have layoffs if they plan to function as an entity. They are talking about taxes in some cases, but the taxes seem to be beyond the Lafleur curb disaster that's occurring at the state level. The fact that feds are also cutting more money, you'll never be able to tax your way out of this. That time is done. And so cuts are coming. There's a lot of denial. Nobody wants to be the person making those cuts if you're a Democrat. If you're a Republican, then you should be chomping at the bit to make these cuts as quick as possible. Sooner you cut, the better, and sooner you can get into a position where you can start to function again. Government has built up things like barnacles on a ship that have just piled up over the years and become wasted government projects and money and grant grifting operations and all kinds of stuff. Bruce Harrell recently, the mayor of Seattle, running against, if somehow they found a crazier person to run against him. So you got two crazies running for the mayor of Seattle. And one of the things, though, he did mention in a recent debate was that 70% or more of the people who get homeless services in the city of Seattle don't come from Seattle at all. I mean, we've essentially been importing drug addicts and other people from around the country for a long time now. They've come out here for Freeattle, for all the free stuff that we gave away. You and I are subsidizing that with our tax dollars or with our public safety, and the drug cartels absolutely love it. We're just like a home and a mecca for drug cartel people here, and so we've made it really easy for them to operate and make sure that they can sell as many drugs as they can in the Pacific Northwest. And it's a massive burden, multi-billion-dollar burden on the local community with all the costs that are associated with it, beyond the sanctuary state status and all this other stuff. As some of the virtue signaling concepts in local governance fall away, because at some point in time, despite the best denial of particularly Evergreen State College graduates where they don't believe math is real or it's racist, eventually it is real, and you're going to have to discover that sometime you have to cut, and time to cut is going to be now. And the cuts will be harsher later, so it's better to cut now. And as government gets right-sized down, this is an opportunity for people that are serious, which means you're probably not a Democrat, but you're serious about actually fixing the problems in local government. It's a good time to get involved, and it's not a fun time because you're not in easy street where you're just rolling in the gravy train and cash is dumping on your head. You have an opportunity to do the serious and hard work of making these cuts. law enforcement cuts are not where you start, even though that's where Democrats love to start. You cut all this other crap and garbage that have been built up, like those barnacles on the ship, year after year. It's time to cut them off. So that's what's happening. The school districts are in the same situation. Many of the counties, the same situation. The states in the same situation. And the feds aren't coming to save them. So this is the time when serious people should get involved in local governance, because the outcome of that tends to produce a much stronger and more effective local community when you're all done. So I know we're kind of early stages of these cuts, but it's coming and it's inevitable. We do need good people in office. We have no choice. At some point in time, they need to get good people in office. We have terrible people in office now, mostly. So removing the bad ones and replace them with good people will at least give us, or sane people at least, gives us the opportunity to start shifting the needle and moving in a different direction. Until then, that's what we're faced with. Guys, thank you guys for all your questions. There was a ton of comments on today's live stream, and I didn't see how many people were on simultaneously earlier, but it looks like about 745 of you did log in during this live stream today live. If you are watching this after the fact and somehow you stayed on all the way through to the end, feel free to ask your comments down below. I usually do try to get back to questions or comments even if it's after the live stream's done. I got to get to video recording and editing here tonight, so hope all's well, guys. And remember what I always say, the future belongs to those who show up. If you want to make an impact, you got to show up and get out there and make an impact. Otherwise, if I see you at one of these events, make sure you come up and say hi, and I'm going to try to be on next